Okay, welcome everyone to session 4. I'm Denise Chang, your host for the Embodied Healing for Inherited and Colonial Trauma in collaboration with the Women's Resource Center. I am a somatic healing practitioner. What that means is I work with the level of the body to find energetic imprints of trauma and heal them with blueprint energetic. So blueprint is our health. So we all, and we'll dive into this a bit more today, that's the topic for today, attuning to the wisdom of the body. We all have a blueprint template of our self, right? Capital S. So you may say like your higher self, your soul, your authentic self. But essentially there is a blueprint template, and it resides within us. And what happens is that when we experience trauma, whether that's developmental trauma, acute trauma, shock trauma, or intergenerational or ancestral trauma, these imprints live in the body. So if you're wanting a refresher on how trauma impacts the body, I would highly recommend you check out weeks 1 through 3, which are, I believe, available on the Women's Resource Center website, so that you can kind of get a refresher for how trauma lives in the body. Today, we're going to orient towards health and how to heal. And so that's the work that I do. I'm also a women's circle facilitator, women and femmes, gender non-binary folks as well. And my work currently is focused on serving low income and BIPOC communities. So it's such an honor for me to be serving the Women's Resource Center and the community at SDSU, because I remember when I was at SDSU, I'm a 2016 alumni, I needed this the most. That was a time in my life where I felt really isolated in my experiences, when I felt like I had to overachieve, I needed to push and do as much as I could in order to feel some sense of health and safety. And so I wanted to offer this to the Women's Resource Center as an alternative to how we can experience college life, how we can experience self-care and health when there's a lot that's happening in our collective field, especially since we know that 2020 has been really rough. However, my personal belief is that intensity, whether that's negative or positive connotations, it transcends that binary, and emotions and sensations are simply that. It's what we assigned in terms of value to specific emotions and sensations in the body or relationally. And so by learning how to understand how trauma shows up for us in terms of, again, sensations in the body or structures or visions that we experience in the body, there's also health that we can attune to. By understanding how trauma shows up, then we can meet it, right? When we can name what's causing us harm or pain or perpetuating cycles, when we can name them and we can identify them, then we give it language, and with language we can begin to unpack it, we can begin to understand it, and we can begin to work with it. So that's really my intention for these sessions. And for today, it will be more interactive. So if you're watching the recording, just know that if it seems shorter than usual, it's because there are more shares, but the content, the lesson for today will be recorded. So all of that said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see the slides that I have for you today. So today is session 4, Wisdom of the Body. We're going to start with a grounding meditation, followed by introduction and acknowledgements, some short group agreements. Since I know some of you are new, I'm not sure if you watched the recording, so I will share them, followed by the lesson. And actually, instead of group shares today, it's going to be the group healing experience. Okay, so that said, we'll begin with this practice that that is called orienting. And this is very common in trauma-informed spaces and in trauma healing. And orienting is this practice of using the 5 senses to signal to your nervous system that you are in the present moment. And by engaging the senses, it's talking to our brain, right? Because we receive information through our senses, that we're safe, that there's nothing causing us harm, and that there's a possibility of our nervous system coming into regulation instead of activation or collapse, which is hypoarousal. So we'll start with just a gentle gaze, looking around your space. And you might be really familiar with where you are, but with this practice, I wonder if there's any possibility of noticing colors or textures, temperatures that are standing out to you right now. Maybe something new or something really familiar. There's no right or wrong way. There's all possibilities are welcomed here. All variations of lived experiences are honored. So for me, I'm noticing this green sticker that I have on my pink water bottle. And by naming the colors, naming its texture, naming the object, that's helping the neuroception, that communication between our senses and the nervous system. We'll just gently take a breath here. There's no need to force or manipulate the breath, just allowing for breath to come into the body. And a soft exhale. We'll do 2 to 3 more like that in your own time. Inhale. And exhale, let it go. So you can take your time. If your pace doesn't match mine, that's okay. And on this next inhale, see if you notice anything that you smell. And now notice where your hands might be placed on. Perhaps if it's an object, for example, the chair, the table, maybe noticing its texture. Maybe if skin to skin feels like a little bit too much right now, moving your hands elsewhere. Or if placing your hands on your thigh to feel the texture of your skin, the temperature. Perhaps noticing any narratives, any judgments or value, right, that we assign to what we notice. And see if there's any possibility of just becoming an observer, a non-judgmental observer. Yeah. Maybe right now you lick your teeth or your lips, noticing what you taste, pleasant or unpleasant. And finally, just attuning to what you hear, the sound of my voice, perhaps any background ambient noises like the fan or noises outside the apartment or building that you're in. Perhaps even the sound of silence. Maybe notice how this exercise might have impacted the way you're feeling right now. Maybe the quality of your presence feels a bit more full. Maybe the quality of your presence feels a bit more accessible. It's okay if not. Again, there's no right or wrong way to experience yourself. Your experiences are valid. Beautiful. From here, you're welcome to close your eyes if they're not already there. And I'd love to invite you to notice the parts of your body that are supported by what's beneath you. So maybe this is something that you um, might find a little bit challenging, or maybe this feels easy, or somewhere in between. But see if you can notice the parts that um, that space between your body, the clothing that you're wearing, and the support beneath you. I wonder if, as you attune to that space between your body and the support, if there's a texture or a temperature that's there. And maybe you focus on one area, maybe you focus on the lower back, or perhaps the upper back, or if it feels okay and doable, perhaps um, the bottoms of your thighs, the back of your thighs. Or maybe, if none of those feel doable, maybe attuning to the space between your feet and the floor. So I'm noticing the texture of the carpet. It feels soft and yet also a bit porous. And the intention of this exercise is to attune to sensations of support, sensations of a downward flow of energy. And we'll take it a little bit deeper now by connecting to your energetic roots. And so if this feels new to you, bear with me. But imagine that you have a set of roots, just like a tree. And these roots are unique to you. So however they appear in your mind's eye, trust that. Trust your intuition. And these energetic roots begin to grow down, down, down from perhaps your tailbone or maybe your perineum, down towards the soil of the earth. And easily it penetrates through the concrete, down into the soil where it finds its natural home. And these roots go down, 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 deep through the soil, through the sand, through pebbles, through the mycelium network, down through watery layers, gaseous layers of the earth, all the way down towards your fiery core. And as you relate to your roots, as you imagine your roots, maybe you take a deep breath there. So see if your awareness, right, the witness consciousness that observes all things, can drop down past the body into the soil of the earth, connecting with your energetic roots. Beautiful. Just taking a few deep breaths here. And now, before coming back to the space, the screen, perhaps imagining that this root system begins to grow wide. It begins to take up space. Earlier it was going down and deep. Now it begins to grow wide. A 360 taking up of space. And maybe you begin to meet with the root systems of other trees, other plant life, noticing how sturdy and strong and deep these roots need to grow in order for a tree to grow tall and wide, to take up that space, unmovable yet flexible. And perhaps even noticing if your root system meet with the root systems of those that are here with us sharing this space in today's session. Maybe you might not know them. Maybe you have no idea who they are. But I wonder if we can still create a sense of interconnectedness that transcends our identities, while important, but on an energetic level. I wonder if There's a weaving of our roots that feel accessible and doable. Maybe you notice how these root systems make space for each other. How the closer we get, the more stronger we are. That the deeper these roots are interwoven, the less we feel alone, the stronger we become, and how we make space for each other. That each root system carries its own sovereignty, and with that comes lived experiences, stories, wisdom. And as we grow stronger together, the shared wealth of wisdom can be accessible. That we remember that we're not meant to do life alone. That colonization, capitalism, and patriarchy has conditioned us to believe that we are hyper-individual. And the truth is, we're not meant to do life alone. We're meant to find belonging. We're meant to feel like we have a place on this earth. And the way we know that, the way we can understand our place, our purpose, our mission on this earth is relationally, right? How we impact those that we love and those that love us, how we show up for one another, how we create community, right? It's not a community, it's not one person at the center while others follow blindly. A community is the lived experiences of a group, of the relationships that are within them, that are strengthened through authenticity and vulnerability. I wonder how that might land for you and how that might feel on a felt sense level, on a body-based level, or perhaps on an energetic level. Is any part of that true for you? Or maybe it doesn't feel true for you right now. Even if there's 2% of a desire or resonance, let's take another deep breath here into our collective root system. And exhale. We'll do 2 more. Beautiful. And slowly come back to your space, perhaps noticing once more your feet on the ground or the texture that's beneath you. Gently opening the eyes and orienting once more, looking around the space, naming objects and colors. Great, and slowly making your way back to the Zoom. And I wonder how that felt for you. Maybe you can drop it in the chat, what you noticed, how it felt for you, perhaps a word or a phrase that feels reflective of your experience in that meditation. I'd love to know. It looks like we have a new friend here. Can't see your name for some reason, but hello and welcome. Grounding, beautiful, recentering. Calm me down a lot, calming, great, good to know. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so I'm gonna skip over my introduction because I've introduced myself earlier. And then also if you wanna know a little bit more, please feel free to watch the first 3 recordings. Meaningful, beautiful, thank you. Great, thank you, Josiah. Wonderful. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the keepers of the land that we reside on. I am on Kumeyaay territory, and I know that many of you are as well. I acknowledge that this land was stolen through genocide and through murder, rape, and many other countless traumas to the original keepers of this land. And we demand that reparations be made and that we give the land back to its original keepers. I also wanted to acknowledge my teachers, Rachel Maddox, and many, many more that have contributed to the wisdom that I'm sharing with you all today. I wanted to acknowledge my ancestors, the lineage of traditional Chinese medicine, as well as your ancestors for bringing you here today. And maybe that was a choice that you made consciously, but I am a believer that our ancestors are constantly communicating with us through messages and signals and intuitive nudges. So I wanted to acknowledge them as well. And more importantly, I wanted to acknowledge the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the lives that have been lost at the hands of systemic and cultural oppression and police brutality. I want to say the names of George McFloyd, Elijah McClain, Breonna Taylor, and many, 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 many more named and unnamed whose lives were lost. And we demand that reparations be made and that we honor the joy and uplift the joy of all Black lives. Also wanted to acknowledge COVID-19 and the impact that it has had on especially low-income communities, on folks who do not have access to healthcare, and the systemic, cultural, financial impact, economic impact, social economic impact that it has had on our communities and globally as well. And last but not least, I wanted to acknowledge you for being here, for showing up to care for yourself. I'm so glad that the invitation that we shared earlier this week resonated with you, and I'm really glad that you're here. Okay, so we're going to have a moment for this share, but before we do that, I wanted to share the group agreements, since many of you are new for today. So by being here, you acknowledge to these, you agree to these guidelines to help co-create a container that's safe enough for everyone to feel seen, witnessed, and honored for their lived experience without needing to feel like there's something wrong with them or that they need to be fixed. And this helps create that trauma-informed container. And so the first is self-consent and sovereignty. You do not need permission from me or from anyone else to meet yourself where you are. Feel free to at any time tend to what you need, whether that's using the bathroom or getting water or switching up where you're seated. And everything that I offer is an invitation. So you can opt out as needed from a share. You can turn off your video. You can unmute yourself and mute yourself whenever you want. You're also invited to change your mind if you start to share and you realize that it might be a little bit too much, or today's session's too much. You're more than welcome to come back and watch the recording later. You're invited to take your time, to take up space as much as you want, and there's no need to feel rushed. I may be speaking a little bit faster right now, but that's because I want to make sure we have enough time for the group experience. If you're sharing, and once you've shared, I invite you to take a moment to check in with yourself. This practice of finding self-consent, of exploring and building the muscle of self-consent, right? So taking that moment to really check in and be like, am I complete? Is there anything more I want to say? Or have I changed my mind about what I'm sharing? Please feel free to share that. This is a judgment-free and brave space, so we're really here to listen to one another, to receive what you have to share and what you want to share without any response needed unless you ask for it. Everything that's shared here is confidential and anonymous. So whatever you learn here about one another, please honor one another's confidentiality. So no identifying information shared outside of this group. And we're in this together. All parts of you are welcomed here, no matter what level you are in your healing, and trust that to the best of your ability in this moment, that I do want to care for you. Interdependence and trust. This one is really about this trusting in the sovereignty and the inherent wisdom of everyone that's here. We'll talk about inherent wisdom in a moment here, and sovereignty really is that you have the right to decide what is best for you, how you want to take up space. And so even if imprints are showing up, so you're starting to feel maybe activated, or maybe you're feeling a little bit dissociative, I trust that that's happening for a reason, right? And I trust in your sovereignty to choose whether to name that, or to heal, or to work with that, or to meet that in whatever way. And if you want guidance, please let me know, because I don't know what level you are in your healing, and please let me know through the chat box if you'd like any guidance on meeting yourself where you are, especially in relation to trauma. We're not here to give advice. We're really here to just reflect back what you said. And if you do want guidance, please feel free to ask for it, because while I'm not here to give you advice and tell you, what's right, I do have some experience in healing my own personal trauma and healing trauma with my clients. So there are some things that I can offer that's up to you to take or leave. What we can do instead of offering, advice, is we can offer love and encouragement through the chat or with body language. I know nowadays people like snapping their fingers on Zoom. One of the things that I love to do is put my hands up and just offer I call it a beam, where we're just beaming the person that shared with love, saying that, hey, I acknowledge you. Thank you for sharing. I see your vulnerability and your wisdom. Sound good? Feel free to drop it in the chat if it feels good. If there's anything you want to add, if there's any request or feedback for container setting to help you feel a little bit more safer, please let me know. Great, I see a thumbs up, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna stop the share now for group shares. So I wanted to offer a recap of where we have been over the last 3 weeks, really 3 sessions, because they're bi-weekly. We learned what is decolonial healing. We also learned how to create resilience and how to feel resourced to meet difficulty. So earlier during, I believe it was Travania's, oh my gosh, a share, when I talked about when we build our resilience and our self-care, we build a momentum of health so that we can meet the difficulty when it arises by creating strength and creating health, right? And I'll talk about this. I know I'm repetitive, but that's because I really want to show you and tell you and really encourage you to orient towards health as much as possible, because it's not about bypassing. Again, it's not about like trying to like push away and sweep under the rug the difficulty and the trauma, but it's about creating health so that we can meet the difficulty. Oh, wait, hold on. I believe Celine has left, so I need to do the resume recording. Okay, it's already recording, great. And then on the 3rd session, we talked about symptoms of trauma and how we can begin healing. So I'm curious for you to consider, what is your current relationship to your body? And maybe you're at like the very beginning, where even the notion of having a relationship to your body, that the body is something that you can have relationship with, is new and foreign. Or maybe you're someone that feels really, really comfortable with listening to the body, knowing how to meet the body's needs, knowing how to work with sensations. So that's like 2 ends of the spectrum. I'm just curious where you might be within that spectrum. You can drop it in the chat. What is your current relationship to your body? Beginning.
I don't mind talking.
Sure, go for it, yeah.
That's easier than chat boxes for me. I think I feel very in tune with my body, but also in a place of trying very hard not to judge it for the things that it can and can't do.
Mm-hmm.
particularly with the way that the pandemic has changed and upset like my routines and things that I used to do for my body. And you know, it takes a different toll.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing. That's beautiful that you were able to shift and meet your body and its needs with the pandemic. Yeah, totally. hmm So, for context, the reason why I asked, what is your relationship with your body is because, like Amanda said, our body signals to us what it needs, and our body is also the vessel for where our blueprint template of health lives. And so, in yogic philosophy, there's this thing called the koshas, right? And it's really about the subtle body. And so we have a physical body, but within that physical body, there's also an energetic body. There's a mental body, so like our mind, but our mind, right, the thoughts that we think actually create neural pathways, neural networks into our body. It sends signals to our body. And there is a vibration that happens within that as well. And then there's also like the intellectual body, and then within that the bliss body. And I think that when all of these bodies are in coherence meaning they're all aligned, similarly to like chakras, but not quite. This is more like a layers, right, as opposed to chakras, which are more hierarchical. When we bring our bodies into coherence, um, that's when we're in our health. That's when we are accessing the blueprint template of our essence nature, right? So it's a little bit, this might feel a little bit esoteric, a little bit spiritual, because that's of our humanity secret. Colonialism wants us to think that we're just like people, physical like bodies, but the truth is spirituality is part of our humanity. It is natural for us to find solace, to find sanctuary in our spiritual practice. Colonization has wiped out a lot of traditional practices and lineages, and religion has become institutionalized. Religion and spirituality are not the same thing. And so, as I shared, you know, our bodies, they contain the codes and energetics of health. Even when we're experiencing a lot of trauma or a lot of difficulty or intensity, so many of us have shared that times are hard, right? There's stress, there are deadlines, there are physical, there's literally a virus out there, right? And then there's Donald Trump as our president. There's so much that's causing activation in our bodies. There's so much trauma. And there's also health. There are still miracles that are happening alongside these traumatic imprints. And it's up to us to do our best to, as much as possible, in doable amounts, attune to health while acknowledging that difficulty exists. And our bodies contain our health. There's that blueprint template of what's possible for us when we heal and liberate ourselves from trauma or emotional imprints, right? There's the possibility, the liberation, the freedom, the joy, the happiness, the pleasure lives within our bodies. And what's stopping us, or what's blocking us from accessing that, is trauma. And so, understanding this, there's also this belief that we have an inherent treatment. So if the codes of health, the blueprint of health lives, and trauma is getting in the way, then that means that our body knows how to heal itself. Like when we get a paper cut, right? The body knows how to heal. Within 2 to 3 days, the paper cut will heal. There is a natural inclination for the body to heal. It's a self-healing capacity that sometimes is understood as life force energy, or chi, right? Not sure if any of you have heard of like words like prana or chi or ki. Like Reiki practitioners help to activate life force energy so that it amplifies our blueprint. And what happens when we amplify our blueprint, when we amplify health, the imprint will show itself, because that's the nature of healing. It's not about avoiding or bypassing or covering up the pain and the trauma. It's about meeting the trauma with health, right? So oftentimes it's uncomfortable, we sweat, we tremble, we cry, because that's how we release trauma from the body. And it requires that health for it to resolve, for the trauma to resolve. It requires a new result. So like Amanda was talking about patterns, right? Patterns are often imprints of trauma that are perpetuating itself because it wants to heal, but it's caught in a loop because health hasn't showed up. It's perpetuating a cycle of imprint. For example, like I used to have this cycle of waking up anxious and then moving very quickly throughout my day without taking breaks. I would forget to eat lunch. And then at the end of the day, the only way I could slow down was by smoking pot and watching a lot of TV. And I was in that cycle over and over again throughout most of my college life, actually. And it wasn't until I learned how to I began to understand that pattern as a trauma response. And then I began to make choices, small doable choices that would help me break that pattern. And then eventually I started to meet that pattern if it were to show up with health. So for example, instead of getting up in the morning and getting on my phone right away, now I actually put my phone away. I don't even look at it. And I just roll out my yoga mat and I just start moving my body the way it wants to for at least 15 minutes. And that has created such a drastic change in that pattern, right? That imprint, because I'm meeting that pattern with a new result. Instead of going on my phone, which I know will trigger that pattern, I'm creating health so that I can meet that pattern if it comes up. So that's not to say that now that I'm doing 15 minutes of movement every morning that I don't feel stressed or anxious anymore. I do, however, I now know how to meet it. Instead of letting that anxious pattern perpetuate and get worse, I know how to interrupt that because I know what new result it needs. It needs movement, it needs to rest, it needs to go for a walk, right? And so that's like a very micro scale, right? Like how we can create momentums of health. On a deeper level, when we go into like actually healing like inherited trauma, it's those small and doable things that we practice that eventually when we want to meet bigger traumatic imprints, the health has to be bigger. So it requires us to know how to, on a day-to-day, small and doable steps, to titrate into a bigger healing experience. And I've had those in my life relating to my trauma. Trigger warning, I experienced sexual trauma as a child. And I've been able to heal that through these small and doable steps that I've taken throughout my day to create a momentum of health. Is that making sense for folks so far? Please let me know if you have questions, if it makes sense for you, if you have any clarifying thoughts that you like. Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself too if you don't mind being on the recording. And so to create that momentum of health, we can resource. Week 2 and 3, we talked about that. And then building that momentum of health. So those small and doable choices every day. So keyword is small and doable, right? So 15 minutes of movement every day, I can do that. Instead of like, oh, I must do 4 yoga classes a week, or I have to like go for a run every day. Like those might feel a little bit like too much, right? It's like putting too much pressure when really the smallest doable thing is to just move my body for 15 minutes a day. It doesn't have to look like anything. It doesn't have to be structured. But if I just get on my yoga mat or I put on some music and I start dancing, that's doable. I can do that, right? Instead of like forcing myself to commit to like X amount of classes a day or a week, why not just start with small and doable? Okay. So I shared a little bit about my experience with embodied wisdom, but I actually want to remind us of this from week 3 with slowness, titration, and care. So healing trauma requires us to move slowly, right? The whole reason why we experience trauma was because something happened to us or to our ancestors that was too much, too fast, and too soon. We weren't in consent with it. We didn't have enough time to come into consent with what was happening. Too much, too fast, and too soon. And so to heal, we want to move to it slowly. It takes time to heal trauma. Titration is, you know, like in science class or chemistry, how like we do a little bit at a time, because if we put in too much, there's an explosion, right? And it can cause an explosion. So the same thing with trauma. We don't want to go straight to the big trauma because it's going to re-traumatize you. Instead, we want to work with the little ones, we want to start small with like, what can I do? What choices can I make to help me meet the smaller things? Like, I feel anxious in the morning. I can work with that, right? And again, eventually over time, we'll have the momentum of health to meet a momentum of emergency or trauma. So with slowness, titration, and care is another keyword, because trauma, when we experienced it, the reason why it didn't resolve, the reason why two people can have the same experience, but one person have trauma and the other isn't, is because the person who didn't experience, who doesn't have that trauma, experienced care and love, and they got what they needed at that time of the trauma, so that of the experience, because trauma is actually the energetic that lived in the body because it didn't complete. Week 3 is all about that, so please feel free to watch week 3. They got to resolve it, but with that, the person with trauma, the people who are living with trauma, which is on a collective level, many of us have trauma, we weren't getting care for what we needed. In fact, if anything, especially in relation to inherited trauma and colonial trauma, we don't even see it through the lens of trauma. It's just the way things are, right? But that's, if we turn towards it with the lens of trauma, then we can begin to care for it and heal it and break the cycle. So with slowness, titration, and care, trauma responses and symptoms can complete in its own time when we begin to listen to the body. The body is constantly sending us messages with the desire to heal. And so that's the intention of the following meditation. And I'm curious, would a guided practice feel better than experiencing Reiki, where I'm mostly quiet and you're just receiving energy healing, where again, the Reiki is, so I'm not sure if any of you are new to Reiki. If you have done it before, let me know. But basically, it's an energy healing practice through a Japanese lineage that amplifies your blueprint of health. It's not a solve all problem. Yeah, okay, great. It's not like actual trauma resolution work, but what it does, it creates enough capacity, and it amplifies our blueprint, our self-healing. It initiates that self-healing capacity so that we're more relaxed, our nervous system is in parasympathetic rest and digest, and then we can make better choices because we're not in activation, not in hyperarousal. So I'm curious if the meditation feels, because we only have like 14 minutes left, or Reiki feels better, or I could do maybe a 7-minute practice and then 7 minutes Reiki. I'd love to hear what you all prefer, because I want to make sure that you're getting what you need. So option 1 is a 10-minute meditation with 5 minutes closing. Option 2 is 15 minutes Reiki. Option 3 is half and half with no closing shares, which I'm not too excited about, but we could probably like just put in a word or two in the chat box to close. Any preferences? Reiki, okay. Yeah, maybe if I can get like 2 to 3 more votes. Okay, Reiki, great. Another 1 or 2 more votes. Okay, Reiki, wonderful. Can I get one more vote? Okay, great. So we'll do Reiki, and then I will close with like one or two words on how that felt for you. And so with this Reiki session, the invitation, you're welcome to lay down or sit up straight, but the invitation is to maybe notice what sensations you feel in the body as you're receiving this Reiki energy. No need to assign meaning, no need to like say like, oh, this is that, this is, what does this mean? If you want to, I can talk about it. But practice the muscle of noticing sensations in the body. Yeah? Okay. So now I'm gonna stop my share and I'm gonna play some music for you all so that you can receive it. So yes, feel free to lay down, get comfortable. This will be a treat for you all. So I'm gonna play this. Can you hear that music? Give me a thumbs up.
Yeah, I can hear it.
Okay, thank you. Great. Okay. Slowly take your time, no rush at all. You can gently open your eyes if they're not already there. Maybe before moving, you can place a hand somewhere in your body that feels perhaps tender or alive. And repeat the affirmations if you want. I am here. I am now. I matter. I am designed to grow and thrive. I am worthy of feeding my needs. I am here. I am now. I matter. I am designed to grow and thrive. And I am worthy of feeding my needs. Beautiful. And slowly come back to this space. Yeah, please feel free to type in the chat how any thoughts, how that felt for you. I was grabbing the link for you so I can share the music playlist that I just played. And I'm going to stop the share. So if you're watching the recording, thanks for joining us. Hope to see you in person or in the next recording. Take care.